Thanks everybody for coming. I think we'll go ahead and get started. This is a little bit of a different format for our parent education, that we try to tackle subjects that either our parents say is a need, or school systems, or youth, or kind of based on the research, looking at sort of prevention as a whole. So we are Gunnison County Substance Abuse Prevention Project, but we use sort of this public health lens of prevention, meaning that when you're working towards substance abuse prevention, you're also concurrently working on suicide prevention and bullying prevention and strengthening different protective factors that we have. So that's the goal of the parent and community education, is to provide information that surrounds our risk and protective factors. We had done this event similar to this a couple years ago in Crested Butte, and used our youth artwork in order to stimulate a parent discussion. And really the goal is that we are a youth serving organization, and when you serve youth, you need to have youth voice. So really have the youth contributing and being part of the work that we do, and being informed by them. So the questions that were asked came from our community risk and protective factors. Our community risk and protective factors were come to, I guess, using multiple different data sources. So how many people are familiar with the Healthy Kids Colorado survey that students take in class? So this is a survey that's given to all 6th through 12th graders in most school systems in the state of Colorado every 2 years. And our school system has been very supportive and has been on board with Healthy Kids administration since 2006. So we use longitudinal data. We use 2010 until 2019, and we look at trends then across time. Also, in creating that community report, we use the Gunnison Valley Health Systems Community Needs Assessment, and looked at what does the health system say is some of the needs in the community. We look at something that's called BRFIS, and BRFIS is the adult surveillance system, so it asks adults about their health behaviors and perceptions as well. And then we administered a Gunnison County Community Survey in 2017 to over 500 different community members who are over the age of 18, who've lived here 2 years or more, in order to really get the picture of the adult use rates and perception of harm and community profile. So we took all of that data, and we made people come together for meetings for about a year in order to digest the data, and then to create this profile with the help of our evaluation system and CO Boulder. And what that did then give us a report on what are our community risk and our protective factors. So our community risk factors are community norms favorable towards substance use. So that's looking at the community as a whole. That's driven by that data, and also things like the number of liquor licenses that we have in the community, so per population, as well as law enforcement data, as well as things like how many community events do we have that don't sell alcohol. We look at, another one is parental norms favorable towards substance use, and those ones are often combined together, so the community and the parental one. We have high availability of substances, so that is our youth saying, I think it's easy in my community to access substances. And actually, we've seen a decrease in alcohol, we've seen a decrease in marijuana, but we have seen an increase in the number of youth who report that it's easier for them to access prescription drugs. And it wasn't asked on the Healthy Kids, but we've seen an increase of youth who report vaping. So vaping is sort of the new challenge for health professionals across the state of Colorado, and especially with our youth. That I was actually at a presentation not that long ago with the Healthy Kids Colorado administrators, and they said that Colorado was targeted. Their advertisements and the early advertisements that were focused on youth. So Colorado as a state was targeted to receive a lot of those messages because we have some of the, Colorado leads in youth vaping use rates. So that makes sense of why I probably know it. And then the third risk factor that we have, if you look at it from the textbook, it's called extreme economic deprivation. And what that really is, it's something that's called toxic stress. So when you look at, what extreme economic deprivation is, it's things like deep pockets of poverty and insecurity. And what we found by meeting with other similar communities, rural resort communities, was we had a lot of commonalities. We had a high incidence of suicide rates. We had high substance abuse rates in some kids. We could do a whole other presentation on that, which we will next year. So come to that if you're interested. You can also go to Harvard University Center on the Developing Child. It's a great resource to learn more about the implication that toxic stress and adverse childhood experience has on brain development. And then we look at our protective factors. And our protective factors in our community are that we have opportunities in the community for social involvement and rewards, so that there are community programs that engage kids and recognize kids for their participation and their involvement in it. And then we have school opportunities for those pro-social events, and then recognition for rewards. So, the community one we always talk about is for us, it looks like Choice Pass. That is an opportunity for kids to engage in healthy activities, and we have over 40 different businesses. So they're not rewarded just by the pass, but every time that they go into one of those businesses, they're recognized for being a Choice Pass holder, and then that reward continues on. And that's something that we're going to be working with, is to really increase the community businesses' understanding of how important it is for them to recognize our young people for being part of this program. And then we have a high percentage of young people, over 80%, who report that they have a trusted adult that they can go to with help with a serious problem. So that's our third protective factor, is that youth have a young person to go to with help with a serious problem. And I always got to say this for Tina McGinnis. She's got the other 17% on a waiting list of mentors. So if you are interested in being a mentor, to reach out to that organization. There's a lot of information in our community reports on the things that we're doing good in and things that pose a risk to young people. And then I think it's important to talk about that risk piece, that risks are not predictive.
Yeah, so in the prevention world, we look a lot at the risk factors in our community. But risk factors aren't predictive because we have those protective factors also. So what that really means is experiences that happen to one young person, or risks that happen to one young person. Young people are going to have bad things happen to them, but just because that happens doesn't mean that they're going to have a bunch of terrible health effects later in life, and that's because of protective factors. So in the prevention world, yes, we're looking at those negative things, but we're also looking at positive things and protective factors in young people's lives to reduce the chances that risk factors will turn into problems later.
And by the way, my name is Carrie Comerford. Sorry, I'm the director of GCSAM, and this is Beth Stuberg, and she's our education specialist. Sorry for the lack of introduction. One last thing that I need to announce before we have a discussion based on the artwork, and that is that we received information from Vail Resorts that the Choice Pass will be continuing. So just wanted to make that public and just make sure that people are aware of that they will continue to honor the Choice Pass program, which is great. Yeah. And all the other community partners, which they're different places, because I think a lot of times they don't realize that they can go to Mario's and get, I think it's pizza, or mochas and get hot chocolate in lots of different places. Okay, so here are the questions. How does excessive alcohol use in our community affect you? When you think of excessive substance use in the community, what comes to mind, and how has vaping impacted my peers? So really this is, we'd like to hear from you. Based on the questions and the artwork, what are some things that stood out to you? Or that you didn't know? Yeah.
I thought it was very telling that they vaping in the bathroom, because my kids come home all the time and tell me about it. And that they catch kids, this is in Crested Butte, they catch kids vaping in the bathrooms nonstop. And how to deal with it. And just recently my daughter was like, should I tell? Then they'll know I'm a snitch because they knew it was me. And is it really that bad? And so but I hear about this happening in the bathroom a lot. So I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, it was a common theme in them, and something that we have heard too from school administration and from my own nose. When I walked into the high school and I thought, it smells like bubble gum. I just had a piece of bubble gum. And I did not make the connection, and somebody else said, I think that's baking garlic that you smell. But all of a sudden I was like, I feel like a hubba bubba. Something to chew. And so I know that the school administration also is concerned that it's different than smoking a cigarette. It's very quick, which is part of the concern that from a health-related standpoint, what they're finding is that the amount in which they're consuming is a lot more because they're smaller hits that they're taking over time, but the amount of nicotine that is in the devices is twice as much as what's in a cigarette. So I think it's something we have heard from administration and from peers of how do we handle this? How do we get them to stop?
What else stood out in the art for people?
Yeah.
The type of colors that they were using in their artwork, like one piece I can see right now, super vibrant. And then there's a couple other pieces that aren't necessarily as vibrant. They're a little bit gray, they're kind of a little bit darker, so kind of speaking to what they're maybe internally feeling.
So kind of looking at art as expression of that emotion, and all of a sudden I started thinking about Dave White's magazine called Ink. Has anybody seen that magazine? That the English, he teaches English in Denison High School, and very common in those pictures as well is sort of that darkness as a convey of emotion.
There's a few different ones actually that I liked, and they kind of didn't present it as a gateway drug, but they presented it as going along. There was one like the waves, which said this and then this and then this, and then that's right for a lot of people. I just talked to my daughter. She was spring class. She's sophomore in high school, and she's like, "Oh, Mom, everyone's smoking like cigarettes." She goes, "No, it's not cigarettes. It's Juul vaping. I know that doesn't taste good." She goes, "No, it's flavors." I go, "So you like it?" She goes, "No, make a cigarette. She'll make her up. I'm not good." So that luckily, but if it hadn't made her sick, she might have liked it because it tastes good and stuff. But
And I think that there are many of us who ourselves or know somebody who has ingested something that's made them sick and they continue to ingest. It's not a deterrent. So if anybody has ever drank and had a hangover or thrown up, that doesn't make you stop all the time because what you get from it outweighs from that perception.
It was too much. She said, "No," and I didn't realize it was that concentrated.
You know what's interesting too is, and something that from a public health standpoint is being looked at, is there's a total separation in young people's minds between vaping and
Yes.
tobacco use. Is that they would say, I would never smoke a cigarette.
Right.
But they would vape, and that's, we've been talking a lot with schools, and it's like we're back in the 1980s with cigarette use. With the same amount of use rates, not having a lot of health effects information. And in the 90s and the 2000s, you saw a huge decrease in nicotine. We can look at that at the Healthy Kids Survey, that the nicotine and tobacco use in Gunnison County decreased from 2010 until 2 years ago. And then when you include nicotine in it, you see a big spike again. And there is sort of a separation of, I wouldn't do that, just like you said, that she was saying, oh, it's not cigarettes, it's
Yeah, and it tastes good. But I really did like that,
the way it was.
what will be in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can be really up and down too.
Yes.
I thought there's a bunch of just deep thinking going on, obviously. Like, these kids are definitely aware of what's going on, and I wonder how many of them are being affected by peer pressure, are partaking in what they're not admitting to, and how that affects like self-esteem and stuff. Like,
I guess maybe that's a question for parents of,
yeah.
or
We
our
couldn't
youth
hear.
reporting about peers. She said she's, in there, she sees a lot of deep thinking and why people are using, and she wonders if there's peer pressure, that young people are feeling that they should use.
Yeah.
And then I just said maybe parents could speak to that of,
I'm curious, like, what would, because they obviously want to feel differently than they're feeling. They want to feel different, and, or numb off what they're doing, or whatever. And what, I guess, does anyone have a really good, healthy way to feel different, but not ruin your body and your mind? You know what I mean?
Right. Like, what can you do with
What's
it?
the alternatives?
Yeah, and it's like teenagers, like I think back to when I was a teenager, and like, it really was just to be cool. Like, you know, like it really was, it's like a status thing. Like I couldn't admit it back then. I didn't think it was anything new. But I really think that's what it is comes in. Like, it's just something to like fidget with, and it's something to like maybe get parents out with and socialize with.
yeah, I guess you hit a few things. I mean, and I can always talk, so please don't let me talk if you have something to say. But part of the goal, the original goal of the Choice Pass program was to have something easy that you could say that you didn't want to lose, so you didn't have to give in to peer pressure. So kids were saying, I need something to help me say no. And that, when Jonathan Houck really was in charge, looking back at a lot of his notes, that was a main driver, was so that kids could say, man, I'm not going to lose my Choice Pass, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
See it, and it was easy to be able to just say that, because it is difficult to say no to your peers. It's not difficult to say no to your parents all the time, but it's
Right.
difficult to say no to your peers when you're at that age and you don't want to be viewed as being uncool, which is also what we've heard from a lot of youth, that it's kind of this cool thing to do. That it's cooler than smoking marijuana, and a lot of them don't really smoke marijuana. But juuling has become sort of this thing.
That
That
they
we've
feel
seen in
differently,
middle
they're not
school,
too
really.
high that someone's gonna notice or they can't function. But it's just enough to make them.
So that's getting to another reason, right, of maybe why somebody would choose to use substances. Sometimes we would choose to use because it's a social or it's a social pressure. But another reason is that internally, things don't feel right. And how do you get them to feel right internally in a healthy way?
Do you get high when you smoke a Juul?
When you do what?
When you smoke Juuls?
it's like a nicotine buzz, so it's gonna be similar to what tobacco products do. So it's a stimulant.
Except for it's really strong. It's a lot stronger than smoking cigarettes. So you just get one drag. It's like,
Yeah, it's highly concentrated.
right.
The other issue with Juuls and vaping products is it's not regulated by the FDA, and so there really is a lot of uncertainty about what other chemicals are in the products, and then what happens when combustion of the plastics and those other chemicals. So I think that, because we don't have the health effects, it gives this false perception of it's safer. But we don't have health effects, so we don't know.
Where did they get them? At the shop?
A lot of youth under 18 report getting them from someone who is 18 that's purchased them.
And they sell them like at,
You can buy them at convenience stores,
Really?
online.
I heard gift cards online now.
Yeah, you can just click, I am 18, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and even in their kind of early marketing campaigns, they even had gift cards as rewards for like certain games that you play on your phone and certain apps. So it is very targeted marketing that's taken a step back because they've gotten some pressure. But
So the complexity of your question, first you gotta figure out what internally is not feeling good. And then you look at, based on that, you often have people who are seeking out different substances in which that helps them regulate that. Then, sort of being informed by that, you can look at what are other activities that can provide it. So, years ago I remember talking about high-risk activities. High-risk activities are really good. How many people in here enjoy high-risk activities? A high-risk activity is something that you might fall flat on your face when you're doing, but gives you the sensation of like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do that again. So it could be things like
didn't die.
snowboard, yeah, I think I might do that again, right? So it could be everything from athletic events, competition, or four-wheeling, or snowmobiling, or rafting, or rock climbing, or public speaking, or playing a musical instrument and performing, or writing, or speech and debate, all those things have that sort of sensation of I'm going to get up, I'm going to do something, and it might go good or it might go bad. And when it feels good, we have a little thing of dopamine, and we feel like, oh, yeah, that was good. I wanna do that. Yeah. Sometimes it's internally we're regulating and we can't calm down, we can't quiet things. Why can't we just, I just feel always keyed up. And that's where maybe we would seek out things like meditation or swimming or yo-yoing, something that's repetitive in motion that allows us to calm. Extreme yo-yoing. I think I'm in the art center, and Orsh School used to be here, and we used to have they used to have yo-yos and allow kids that when they needed time to relax to yo-yo. That's why that just association. Mhm.
So since Juuls are so readily available, I mean, obviously you can get them at convenience stores online. How much are they costing? I mean, I have no idea, but my high schoolers talk about Juuls all the time.
Yeah.
How people get in trouble at
It's-
school with them, but then they bought them for like $200 from somebody.
Right.
Or
it's $49.99 for a starter pack with 4 pots,
And what about the device? Because that's just for the size.
including the device,
Oh.
and an additional 4 pots. And then the pots are a little bit less.
The pops, the doses.
That's
Yeah,
what
it's the
they're.
nicotine and the flavoring.
I should have brought it for my mom's home so that we can show people how it
Yeah. Well, so Juuls, I don't know if everyone knows this, but Juuls were originally created to help like adults stop smoking cigarettes.
is.
But then what happened is kids started to smoke them because they taste good. They had all these flavors like creme brulee, mango, and berry. But the actual company of Juul banned all those flavors. They only have mint and tobacco now because of this issue. But what is happening now is there's all these knockoff brands of pods. So it's like having this like counter effect basically. But yeah, they're like $45 the battery, and then pods of 4 are like 20. And
So if they're
a
spending
pod is-
200, somebody else is making a lot
yeah,
of money
yeah,
out of them.
yeah, someone's selling right. Yeah.
how long does a pod last?
Well, it's essentially like a pack of cigarettes, but since it's so easy to smoke, it doesn't last that long, because
Yeah, it depends on
yeah, you
how
stay
long it's
inside.
Like a day
Yeah.
or two
Yeah,
days?
a couple days, I'd say, yeah.
And what happens at school when you get caught?
Well, I am not a school representative, but it follows their tobacco policy. And so they follow that policy of what the school is. We have helped interact with the school when they're a Choice Pass student. So we always tell them that if they're a Choice Pass student and they get caught using on campus, that you can call us and then we'll initiate our Choice Pass broken pledge violation, and have done that quite a few times with the school system in order to really help create an understanding between the parent and the child about what's going on. And honestly, Emily has had a couple different conversations in which the young person already feels physiologically addicted, so they have some withdrawal symptoms and they don't want to stop using, but they don't know how to stop using. And so we have been working with, and this is just good to know too, that we've been working with a local mental health provider. She's a licensed social worker, that when we have those meetings, if the family feels like, and the young person feels like it would be beneficial to have additional sessions, that she's been doing them at a very discounted rate as part of that violation and in order to help families. So the violation is really, we don't see it as punitive. I mean, and it's not I kind of joked at the beginning of this year that we started including nicotine in our drug testing, and we've had more violations this year than ever before. And at first I was like, and I have to report that. And I was feeling a little like, shoot, why did we do that? But it really is not a negative thing. It's not punitive. When a person violates their Choice Pass, and it really is, the goal of the program is to have parents really be the ones who use that contract, not us to catch them. But the drug testing piece is the piece that we need to do for accountability for the ski resort and for our grant funders to show that there's integrity in the program, that we're making sure that youth aren't using. So when that happens, based on what the violation was, the suspension is for a very short time period, and it's not just the ski pass. So all the youth have a card that gives them the discounts at all the different locations. So it's part of that process of having integrity in your word and bringing it in and bringing the card in and having a conversation with Emily, who's our coordinator, about what happened around the use. And more times than not, in the last 5 years in which I've been the director, usually there's something that has happened in that young person's life that they talk about as part of it, or after they're connected in that one-on-one, then the family's brought in and they sort of talk about it as a family. And it's an opportunity to get more resources for the young person or the family if needed, or just to say, thank you, this was a really good learning experience. So it was a long answer. But I think it's important to know that process. And then they figure out how to earn that pass back. And it's youth driven, so the youth gets to decide for the most part, unless it's outlandish. But what they do in order to repair harm and kind of restore the trust within the parent and with the program, that they're going to uphold the integrity. That's really kind of the goal, is that we want kids who are in the program to be in the program because they're going to uphold the integrity of the program. Not that they're going to use and tell their friends that they're Choice Pass, but they're still using. That really harms the integrity of the program. I thought you had a question.
I don't know, when my kids were about 12 or 13, and they came home talking about, the kids doing stuff, I immediately sent my husband to City Market and got drug tests. Because you can get them at City Market, just in a cup, drug tests. And I've been giving my boys random drug tests ever since. And my oldest son, I don't know if this will work forever. We are working out, right? We're just working it out as we go. But my oldest son, so far, he's said that right there is what has kept him from doing anything. Because we now go online and we have everything. We have all the drugs, alcohol, and nicotine, and just randomly giving the test. And so that he has actually told me, he's like, I'm glad you did that, because that's what keeps me from doing it.
And I think probably in addition, there's a conversation about your family values.
Oh, there's a
and-
lot of conversations
Yeah.
that go on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and every family is different. I always say that our job as GC staff is to provide information. That our job is to provide information that's evidence-based, that's based on science, and then it's your job to take that information and decide how does that look in your family. And then overseeing the program, right? Making sure that we have accountability to our grantors, to anybody who's funding us, that we have to report back and look at, you know, for each program that we have and each project that we have, we're accountable for measures to grantors, to the Board of County Commissioners, to the county manager, to the city of Gunnison, to the town of Crested Butte, that we're not just gonna throw something at the wall and see if it sticks, but really make sure that it's in the evidence-based driven format and that we're tracking over time. And I'll tell you that, you know, we have risk factors, we have a lot of protective factors. And we do things in this community that other communities can't do. It's really amazing when we travel around the state and are at meetings and we're talking about what we're doing here, and people are just like, oh my gosh, you do that here? So it's pretty amazing that our school system is really on board with helping with efforts that community organizations, municipalities, we often work with law enforcement, both ends of the valley, and they sit on boards, the health system, the mental health system, the public health system, it's pretty amazing. So really looking at those protective factors of really being able to bolster them when needed. Anything else in that part? It's kind of hard to use our work as a discussion. You can go beyond the artwork.
Well, you picked up the black and white one right there and just read the words on it?
This one?
No, the one next to it, to the left.
This one?
Yep.
Yeah, I like that.
I was impacted by that progression of thought. I just
Oh,
wanted
that's
people to think about that.
So normal, trying, addiction, depression, frustration, and then regret.
It's pretty spot on.
How old were these kids?
High school. I think that's, you know, important because sometimes it's not our own use in which this comes from. Sometimes it's our lens, maybe it's our parent or extended family or somebody in the community that we know. But I think that's an important piece to think about is that, you know, they're not asked about their own use, but they're asked about that community risk factor. And some of them might be reflecting upon their own use, but I think of classes that I teach at Western, and I always ask, how many people, either themselves or you know somebody who struggled with addiction, and almost everybody has known somebody who has struggled with some sort of addiction. And oftentimes it's that progression of thinking, right? That it's kind of going on what you were talking about earlier of sometimes we do it just to be normal or to be inclusive and part of it.
My Jillian said to me that, she said, oh, well, everybody does it. Everybody.
So that's our job. Part of our job is to accurately show that everybody does not do it. And the norm is non-use for every substance. The norm is non-use. But it really poses a risk when that's their perception.
I was gonna say, that that's her perception. Oh,
Because you
all
think
it.
of, like,
Yeah.
our perception is our reality. And if we think that the majority of people are doing that, we may choose to do it, even though we wouldn't necessarily want to. It skews I mean, that is a behaviorism tenant within itself, that oftentimes we do things because we think other people are doing it, so we should do that. Or we don't do things because we think other people are doing
Along the lines of other substance abuse, that first one with the house burning and the Grim Reaper person in there, that really struck me, just, you know, when
it. You wanna hold it up?
About, you know, what these kids might be experiencing, seeing other people's substance abuse.
Yeah, I think
Or
that's,
feeling like that themselves.
I think it's really significant. This is probably more of what they're seeing than what they're actually doing themselves, and that is, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, really, when you engage youth and ask them. A few years ago, we were asked, how does marijuana legalization impact kids? And adults can sit around all day and speculate how it impacts kids. And we had some focus groups through the Gunnison Mentors Partnering Program. We received some marijuana funds. And so we asked youth, and there were middle schoolers in Crested Butte. And we asked them, how does marijuana legalization impact you? And we had a Western student be their artist, and they made this comic strip called Sorry Dude. And it was so eye-opening to us, really, because we didn't know how it impacted them. But what it was a series of disappointments. And so at first it was, hey, I thought you were gonna go skiing with me today. And then somebody emptying their pockets, sorry dude. Hey, I thought you were gonna feed my goldfish for me. And the goldfish was dead, sorry dude. A dad sitting on the couch. Cereal for breakfast again, Dad? Sorry, dudes. And then it was just this series of disappointments, which totally changed our lens of how, because we were looking at, oh, well, we haven't really seen an increase in youth marijuana use rates, so I don't think it's impacted us at all. But that's not the only thing that we need to be looking at. And now, 5 years into this, we understand that our adult use impacts our kids too. Because if we are a parent or an adult and we're intoxicated, we're not available, or we're available in a different way to our young people. That how we interact with them changes. What we can provide them changes based on not only if we're intoxicated, but also think about that in terms of that toxic stress piece. That if when we are stressed, which happens, does it change the way that we interact with people? And so really, I think it's important that, and I'm probably a person that this happens too often, is I may be stressed, but I don't realize it. And I don't take time to necessarily self-care until I'm like, whoa, I am stressed. I better do something. Does that make sense? So really looking at that availability from a parent standpoint and having that guide some of our work and inform us that it's not just that the kids are using and looking at their youth rates, but it's also looking at how we as adults are doing. And that I have often said in our community presentations that our young people are only as healthy as the adults.
I think it's interesting you talk about the disappointments and how that was a series of disappointments for the kids. And I think it just subtly erodes trust in peers, just ever so subtly erodes the trust.
When we're not available in that way.
Yeah, can be counted on. Yeah.
We, Gunnison Valley Mentors asked young people what trust looks like. I think in prevention and across the state and in our community, we're doing a lot to talk about being a trusted adult and kids having a trusted adult. And a protective factor is that you have a trusted adult to go to. And we can speculate on what that means to show up in the life of a young person as a trusted adult. But I think it's hard for adults to know. Or sometimes you're like, yeah, I'm a trusted adult, and kids are like, I don't know about that. But they said things, and they made a little pamphlet, I wish we had some, but like being available and showing up and being there, and whether or not substances or something else taking you away from your kids. I think it's important to remember that it's important to show up for young people. And I think back to your point of asking the question of why are these kids using? Is it social or to get away from something? I think that is different from kid to kid, and only the trusted adults in their lives are going to have the relationship to explore that. But I think it's really important to be able to ask those questions in a way that resonates with that young person. So you have that relationship, like, what are you getting out of this? Or like, what would it look like if you didn't use? Or why is it concerning that all of your peers are using? And asking some of those open-ended questions to really build that trust and build that relationship as a trusted adult and a young person.
And I try not to be very judgmental. I try to be.
It's so hard.
And I'm like, so, yeah, it's not cool, so she'll answer me the truth.
Sure.
And she usually does, but,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
She's stern, or she'll tell me.
Yeah. Well, one tool that we talked about in one of our other presentations that we gave earlier this year, we just talked about how to have trusted adult conversations, and one tool that you can really take away from that is asking open-ended questions when you're interacting with your young person. And I think it's really hard, especially probably as parents and as that authoritative person over that kid. It's like, you know vaping's bad for you, right? Like, no, yeah, like, oftentimes if we're posing yes or no questions, we think we already know the answer, or we definitely know the right answer, and that just kind of stops the conversation. But we know that kids view trusted adults as being there and showing up, so really trying to be mindful of like, okay, am I really listening to this young person, what they're saying, or am I just trying to get my point across to be able to know? So open-ended questions, take away from that, or maybe just
Well, it makes
think
them
about in
feel
your next
their
year.
opinions.
Yeah, of course.
And so there are.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And that's when you really get at some of the stuff that's going on, right? Because we can say, how was your day at school? Good, bad, okay, fine. And, or we can say, tell me about your day at school. Or tell me 3 things good that happened. Who'd you sit by at lunch?
Yeah.
Things that get them talking. And then oftentimes when they're talking and they know you're available, other things come out that they wouldn't come out unless you started that conversation. The showing up, I think, is a huge one, because 3 or 4 years ago, the church behind Subway put on a community presentation, or it was more of a discussion, and they were trying to ask youth, like, what did they need and what kind of programs and what could the adults do to help them. And there was this little guy there, and every question that he was asked, this is what he said. I just, kind of really like it when they come to my basketball game. And then the next question, I just, I kind of wish that they would come to my basketball game. And then the next question, I really like basketball, and it would be nice if the people came there. And to me, it was just so important, that piece of it, because really what he was saying was not just his parents, but also if you're a community organization and you want to engage kids, you've got to be there. You can't just be there when your program wants to be there. They want to see you. They want to know that they're important all of the time and that you're available. And I should need to go to a basketball.
Do you want to ask the question that you were posed before you were the director?
Sure. If I can remember. I used to be hired by GCSF to come give the presentations on adolescent development during sign-up nights since the beginning of the program 12 years ago, 13 years ago. And right before I took the director position, the current director said, I'm not going to be there, do you think you can just fill in for me? I'm like, well, sure, I'm going to go be there anyway, giving that presentation. I did not know what I was getting into. And there was a parent in the community who, at the question and answer time raised their hand and said, yeah, I have a question. How am I gonna raise a substance-free kid in a substance abusing community? I was like, I do not. I'm here to talk about adolescent development. I don't even remember what I said, but I must have said something. But it's something that, you know, that we think about all the time. And somebody asked us when we gave this presentation in Crested Butte about youth substance use, and really here's the definition of prevention, right? A prevention program, when it talks about substance abuse prevention, first of all, I always say we're substance abuse prevention. So we're really figuring out what needs to be there in order to make it unlikely that a person is going to problematically use substance and have an abuse issue. Prevention, the goal is to delay onset of use. We want to delay onset of use as far as possible, right? That we want to be really aware and concerned if we have what's called early initiation of use. So if we have kids who are under 13 and they're smoking pot regularly or drinking, we really need to be asking why. Why? What's going on that's happening? So that's one, right? Early initiation. Not only because why, because oftentimes in those situations, it's better to be intoxicated than it is not. And at 13, we really want to help make sure that that's not the case. Always, but definitely young. Brain is developing until 25. So we want to delay as much as possible. The longer you delay, a couple things. One, you delay, you get social skills. There was a presenter that I love who was asked, when is it appropriate for children to have social media? And he said, when they do not need it to socialize. Once they have learned how to socially interact and have social skills, then you can use social media because you don't need it. Then it's a tool, not a way of life. Does that make sense? So really looking at if you delay until they develop, kind of going back to what does it internally provide them? If we can delay use until later, they're more likely to figure out what else provides them. You know, is there something in terms of if I need to calm down, maybe for me it's gardening. I'm just like, I need dirt. I just need to be in the dirt for a bit. And if I can be in the dirt, then I feel good. And I need a sign in my dirt that says no arguing here. I'm in my dirt. Or is it meditation? Or is it running? Or is it reading? What is it that we internally do? And if we can delay use, they're more likely to find that out. What happens when we don't, or when we have somebody else make this suggestion for us by, you know, being stressed out and handing us a bottle of vodka or something like that when we're young, is not only do we not find out, but that's an immediate gratifier that immediately we don't think about it and we think that it's dealing with it, but it's not, it's still there. But then by the time it resurfaces, time has passed, and then we often engage in that behavior again because it worked. That makes sense. So delaying it is prevention. And then the other piece of prevention is education. Providing education to parents and to young people, not only about substances, because it's not really just about substances. Otherwise, everybody who would drink would be alcoholics. Everybody who used marijuana would have problems. It's not just about the substances, but what are some of the reasons in which somebody would choose, and I'm not even going to use that word choose, but why would they continue to use something that they know hurts them or interferes their connection with other people, that something else is often going on. So I don't know, I still don't know the answer to that question.
Alright, so I don't know if this is actually the forum to bring it up, but I'm gonna bring it up anyways. I have a high school student, and there's this new kind of rage, I would say, going around called stick and poke. You guys know what that's
Oh, I've heard of that before.
So it's
Stick and poke.
yeah. So it's where
You better tell us what it was, what you call
these
it.
kids are giving themselves tattoos with, I don't know where they're getting the needles, I don't know where they're getting the ink. But it concerns me that I think they have looked this up on the internet, there's YouTube videos out there, and they have a perception that they go away, that they fade, that they're just gonna go away in a year. And so it's just totally okay. I mean, and it isn't, I mean, it's concerning to me because it can be infectious. I mean, and I don't know how to get that out in, like, the community and in the school that, yeah, it can be dangerous, you know, so.
I think this is the appropriate forum because that's a health behavior, right? And like the goal is to look at health behaviors. Yeah, I had heard a parent of I think
When another parent told me and said, and the stick and poke, I'm like Googling it, I don't know what it is. And so, you know, then I had an opening conversation. Okay, tell me about this and where are kids getting this? And, oh, at the tattoo shop. I don't really believe that somebody can walk into a tattoo shop and and get a needle and I don't know.
Looks like you can get it online for $20.
Well,
For real?
yeah, I mean, I think continuing to have those health conversations of why it's a concern and
Nope, I don't know.
making good choices.
She said that they think it's gonna go away.
Right.
That's temporary.
Like a Hannah tattoo?
Yeah,
Right.
like it's gonna go in 4 years. When I'm out, it's
Does it?
it'll go away.
It's permanent. Okay. Tell her we had college students verify. It's permanent. These students, they're more of a.
They go nowhere.
And I, this year I've been extending these opportunities to my students, and I've got a lot of feedback from parents that they find it really valuable to have a college student perspective. And I will tell you, I always tell them all the time that you're way more powerful than me when it comes to high schoolers. I don't feel old, but I'm old, according to high schoolers. And they're not. They are cool. And they're authority figures, and they know. And so you tell them that a college student stays
Well,
forever.
and I'm not bringing it against tattoos or anything, but I mean, there's an appropriate place to get a tattoo.
But you're concerned about their health.
At lunch.
So I think, good to bring that up and then just start having those types of conversations of, have you heard about this? What would you be concerned about? And really getting them to think about it. Because if that's something I learned as a clinician, is when you get somebody else to verbalize and to think about it and to say it, it's different than you telling them something. So if we can ask them, what do you think are some of the health concerns about doing that? And they say it, that weighs differently on them than us saying, that is so unhealthy. Do you know that you could blah, 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 blah?
Right.
Or like, when would that get to a point that it'd be concerning? Like, and getting them to think about that, because they're gonna say like, well, not how I'm doing it. Or, it can be done really safely, and that's true. It can be done safely. Stick and poke can be done safely. But just having those open-ended conversations of, like, why do they want it? Why is that important to them? And then getting them to verbalize some of those health effects, because they know too. So it's not you just like, this is terrible. But have them look up some things with you online. Check your sources. It's a good one.
I was gonna say, I just wanna say thank you because you guys are doing a wonderful job in the school system too. And the reason that I say this is because my daughter, when she learned about vaping and drugs and everything, I mean, she is on top of everything. And I'm just totally new. I'm just, that's what? They doing what? What are you talking about? I don't know these things. And Victoria is like, yeah. And one of the things that they show is what they do for your health, in that she's freaking out. My lungs are deteriorating. I'm gonna die because they're smoking around me. Are you getting that? Well, they told me in school, and my brain needs to be feeling well, and so it's impacting her in a good and positive way. So I'm very grateful that everything that you guys are showing today. I think showing the bad things today is stick.
In middle school, but something happens. 10th grade.
Yeah.
Here's what I mean by that is oftentimes, I've always said that elementary, well, first of all, I say kindergartners should rule the world. They should. They're the smartest people, they're the best dressed people, and they're the most empathetic. Outside of that, middle school, elementary school students, you can just hear when somebody comes in, and I always use the fire department as an example. You know when it's fire safety week because your middle schooler and your elementary school people come home and they do this. Where's our fire detectors? Where's the batteries? We need to do a check. Escape plan? Who's got the escape plan? Where are we meeting? What are we doing? And they know that. And then we get into high school, and I don't know if, well, I do somewhat know, but part of what's happening in development changes. I mean, how they see themselves and what becomes important and who's sort of that authority and how you're thinking. We would think that those health concerns would be worried about it, but not all kids. That's why you really look at, for your child, what makes them tick. What's that conversation? Because for some of them, they're athletes and they're very health oriented and they don't want to do that to their body. Others are like, I don't know. I might do that to my body and we'll see. But they don't want to lose Eagle Scout. They're working towards their Eagle Scout, and that's important to them. And for others, it's their artwork, and that's what's important to them. So it's, really figuring out what is it for your young person. Because we were all that way. There were things with us that made us tick, and we didn't want to lose those things. And that's the one thing that we didn't want to sacrifice. For some of us, it's our friends, or really sort of thinking about it in that way. And we love what we do, so thank you for being here. Yeah.
I've raised 4 girls, the oldest is 32, and the thing that we have found has worked best for our family dinners and cooking together, because those conversations, those hard ones come up at a time when they feel most comfortable, when they don't feel like they're being, put on a spotlight and questioned. And we've always found with our girls, those were the best times that these conversations came up, and we were able to talk about things in a more casual atmosphere. And so we were very adamant about family dinners at least 4 nights a week, that everybody sat down together, and being girls, we all cooked together. So I just think it's so important to keep that family dynamic at all times. So when there is something, they do feel comfortable coming to you, and it's not just a random time.
And we tell them we're there. We tell them when we have something to talk about, I'm here, and I'll be available. But that's what we call an emotional high-risk behavior, and almost all of us are pretty comfortable with physical high risk. We will do things that put ourselves at physical risk. But we are less likely to do things like ask for help and ask somebody out on a date and have that difficult conversation with our colleague. And telling your parent or asking your parent to talk about something difficult, that's emotionally risky. I mean, just think of, who can think of a time where you had to talk to your parent and you had to I don't want to talk about it. And it just, that's the emotional risk. So I think you're right of making that environment casual and open. That's just the norm. That's what we do. And sometimes we blow milk out of our nose during dinner, and sometimes we talk about sex.
Yeah, that's one thing that I'm really grateful. In my childhood, is my mom always kept a really casual, open, non-judgmental atmosphere between us. And even when I would be like, "Oh, shut up," she would just be like, "Just let me know. I love you." She would throw things at me, and I'd be like, "Oh," just ignore it, blah blah blah. But I'm so thankful because it really did create this atmosphere and energy between us where like I can go to her for anything, and I know that, and even if then it would be uncomfortable, like I really do feel like she's my one person that like will never judge me, you know. And I think that's what scares kids is judgment from parents.
Especially during the high school year, is even when it's not there, they perceive it's gonna be there.
Right, and they just, like, to me, it's like, it was almost like I just needed a little guidance, and she knew maybe what I was gonna say wasn't gonna be what she wanted me to do or say, but she was like, okay, how am I gonna help you get through this, you know, and make the right decision?
I really love, there's a quote that says, life is inevitably painful, which is very true. That in living, there's going to be a lot of pain. And we help young people by accompanying them with a trusting adult. And it does make things different. Right? Maybe not better, but different. And that's something that we've talked about in a lot of our parent education is if we don't allow young people to fail when they're in our home with us, when they're in high school and middle school, and if we sort of save them from all the hard things or really eliminate their need to navigate that, then the first time that they fail is when we're not there. And they're at university or they moved out of the house. And it's a lot more difficult to do that on your own than it is to be able to do that with somebody who is there and provides for you and trusts you. And just think about with us, that those of us who have partners or best friends, that it's so much easier to go through things with that person than it is when they're not there.
I'm not yet.
I was just thinking about what she said about family dinners and everything. That all boils down to the availability of just being there. And, you know, like for me, it's riding my bike or with my daughter.
Yeah.
I learn so much. I get gossip. I learn all this stuff that I would never, ever be privy to any other way. And it's like, so she'll say something and I'm like, oh, tell me about that. And, you know, it's, oh, but that's all it is being available. And the best advice somebody gave me one time was, you know, if you're home with your teenager, just sit down while we're watching TV or whatever. Just sit there. Don't talk. Just sit there. And you'll learn something. And it's like, oh my gosh, this is so true. It's just being there and not having all the things I want to say. It's just like, ask about that.
Yeah.
You know, you get so much.
Well, different family dynamics, Jillian and I have been alone, you know, it's my own for 10 years, so we kind of have this rooming relationship, but I'm still very much the parent and she and daughter, but I really try to be casual, not judgmental thing, because I'm it, and so she can't tell me, there's, I like the house now.
And that's good then to, and I think, you know, something that we've been working on with the Sources of Strength program in our schools too is we actually have a lot of supports and really building the idea of trusted adults that, I remember for me it was my high school English teacher. And primarily it was because she had the Beatles poster. And I was like, you love the Beatles? So do I. And then we had this connection. And because that then, though, I felt safe with her. And it was that, you know, I make that joke that it was the Beatles, but it was then how she would talk to me because I commented on that poster. And that we have coaches and we have teachers and we have community members and friends who really provide a lot of support for our young people and for each other. And, you know, I think that's one thing that we've been learning is parents of middle school and high schoolers really need support groups and networks just as much as parents of preschoolers. If not more. For different reasons. But often we don't. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because as we get older and we go through that, we're busy and there's things going on. But really making sure that we talk to your kids, friends, parents, and that's something that really came up that we're looking at trying to include in some format next year with our Choice Pass dinners, is providing maybe after we do an education event, an opportunity to have a smaller event in which people come to and discuss it a little bit more, or how does that look in your house, or just time to talk about it, because we often don't do that.
There's just one little concern with that though, and that's with a preschooler, their personality is still forming and they're not so concerned about confidentiality. So for parents to get together and talk about all their teenagers, you do have a young adult who has some things that maybe they don't want to be shared. Like for example, I never have shared my kids' ACT test scores because I say, that's your choice to share those or not. And so that is one little concern.
And
that's why
I think it's less of sharing information about your youth and sharing more information about you as a parent.
Yeah. Right.
So it's more of the support, not because God, can you believe what my kid did, but more of what works in your house with this. So if it could be framed that way, and I think that's a good point, if we do that, that it will be
It's a
framed
great
in
idea.
that.
As long as the teenagers are protected, you know.
And they might be kind of annoyed that you're going to talk with all these other parents and get tips. I think that's a good point, though, making sure that it's really about the parent and not the young person.
I think kind of in summary too, going back to your comment, it's so important to show up for young people, and I think that's has to be at least part of the answer to the question that was posed to you, Gary. How do we raise kids in a substance abusing community? And I think this art does show that that shows up for kids in different ways. So this is used in our communities here, and it's going to be here, and we're going to have risk factors. But I encourage you, if you take anything away from this, it's not to get bogged down by the risk factors that we have in our community, but just take away that we are doing a lot as a community, and one way that you can show up and boost that protective factor for your young person is to be available and to be there.
That is it. And if you have any ideas, this summer we're building our parent ed for next year already. So if you have, if there's topics or ideas. Oh wait, one more thing. Always. Because we're open to topics and ideas, I had about 3 parents reach out to me, and then somebody from the school about doing something about social media. So on May 20th in Gunnison, at the Gunnison High School in the auditorium, and May 22nd in Crested View, and we'll send this out to you so you don't have to hold it in your brain right now. There's a documentary called Like, and it's about social media using Facebook. And
Not just Facebook.
Okay, so I don't know. I have a flip phone still. Everyone's like, I'm not the person to talk about social media.
It's actually, it looks like a really great documentary, and it talks about social media use, especially among young people, and how that affects the brain, and kind of has the tagline, are you using social media or is social media using you? But we heard from another prevention program in the state that they showed it in the community, and it was really well received.
And then we asked, what would you do differently? And they said we should have a panel of people afterwards to ask questions to. So I believe Rowan Health is going to be on the panel, and Rob Whiting, so health, law enforcement. We have a young adult who's a mentor who will be on the panel, and we have others who will be on it. So then after watching it, there's some room for questions and answers about whatever you have questions and answers about.
Yeah, so we'll send out more info on it, so you can get it in your calendars if you want to come.
Sounds good. Okay, so send me information if you want us to include or find somebody to present on the topic for next year.